You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
Hey, Chris, it's good to be back.
Jeff, it is great to be together.
Here we
today.
are, man. Well, hey, today is one of those that you are eminently qualified to speak about on this lesson today.
I am more qualified on this topic than any other human in the world.
Maybe better than anybody.
This is a big topic. It's huge.
It's huge, and you're the best at it. Maybe nobody will ever talk about.
Nobody's better at me than humility.
That's right. So the whole topic today is Jesus' teaching on humility, and you are the most qualified to talk about that.
Thank you so much, and I'll accept that title. Well, hey, today we're going to be doing something that Desiree likes to call law or flaw.
Law or flaw? Oh, these are neat ones.
And
Yeah,
we say flaw just because it rhymes with law.
yeah, that's right.
But it's either a law or it's not a law.
That's right.
All right, so here it is.
Okay.
So there's 5 of them,
Okay.
and you have to guess.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
In California, it is illegal to use a gas-powered vacuum cleaner.
A gas-powered vacuum cleaner? I haven't even heard one of those. I'm going to say law. Everything's against the law in California.
Yeah, it is a law because of the emissions standard in California is so much higher. Did you know that?
Okay.
Did you ever see The Price is Right?
Yes, I have.
When they actually sell a car, he actually says, you listen for it. The announcer, Rod Roddy, or whatever his name is, he always says, complete with California emissions.
That's right.
Because their standard is so much
There you
higher.
go. I know.
All right, number 2,
I
ready?
can imagine our listeners are riveted.
I bet you they are.
They are. I know. That's what I'm saying.
All right. In Arizona, it is illegal to feed garbage to a pig unless you have a permit or the animal is your own pig.
What?
Either you have to have a permit or you have to own the pig.
Yeah, that's so precise. I'm going to say law.
It is very much a law.
A law? Is it? Yeah.
It
All right.
is.
I'm 2 for 2.
You are 2
Yeah,
for
baby.
2.
Maybe I should be the one talking about humility today.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe so. Number 3, in Colorado, it is illegal to use indoor furniture outside of your house.
What? I'm going to say flaw.
It is a law.
What?
Which, by the way, that should be a law everywhere.
Not allowed to use indoor furniture outside.
Because I grew up in an area where people would take a couch that is designed for the inside and put it on their front lawn.
Sure.
Not granted, it wasn't.
And
exactly,
you're not a fan?
Well,
You're not a fan? not a fan?
No, I'm not a fan of that at all.
Okay. All right.
So anyway, that's hilarious.
Okay.
Not a fan.
What about wicker?
Well, I see. That's the thing. I don't know what is indoor, outdoor. I guess.
yeah.
I mean, wicker is definitely outdoor.
But it can be indoor if you have like a sunroom.
Yeah, 3 Seasons room.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. Or a solarium.
Controversy.
If you, in your big mansion, in your solarium, you could have.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
All right, ready for this? Number 4. In Iowa, it is illegal to pass off margarine.
Margarine.
Doesn't even look the same. It has the same letters.
Margarine.
It is illegal to pass off margarine as real butter.
I'm going to say law.
It is a law.
Yeah. Wow.
So you are 3 for
3
4.
for 4.
And then finally, in the last one, it says, in New Hampshire, it is illegal to carry away or collect seaweed at night.
What? I'm going to say law.
All 5 of these
All
were
5
laws.
of those were laws. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's how I picked it, actually. Was
just because the fact that 4 in a row
it
were
sure
laws.
seemed like there was a pattern.
Yeah, so it's
didn't know for
think
sure.
about this. It's illegal to carry away or collect seaweed at night.
Yeah,
But you could do it during the day.
during the day. Day's totally fine, but
Not at night.
enough of that seaweed carrying at night. We're done with that.
I wonder if it's
It's
to
just-
prevent like accidents happening at night, like animals come out at night or something, or poisonous frogs, or
It might be stepping on baby turtles or something.
could be.
Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
Or it could just be so ruckus. Maybe it's the kind of people who pick up seaweed that they're just party animal types, and it just gets too loud at night.
There's all sorts of scenarios that we can create.
I don't know. Okay, man. Well, there you go.
Which, by the way, I don't have to worry about this law because I will never go collect seaweed
I don't think I am either.
for
Yeah,
the rest of my life.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, somebody tried to give me seaweed to put into a shake one time, and just gave me
Were they trying to
powdered
kill you?
seaweed. And they said, "Oh, just use this. It's so healthy. It's so good." And I put a little bit of powdered, and I swear they were trying to kill me. It was the worst thing I've ever tasted.
It's so healthy. It's so good.
Ugh,
Yeah.
that's terrible.
Yep.
So today, Jeff, we're talking about
Weirdos.
Jesus teaches about humility. This
Yep.
is only found in Luke, the book of Luke, It's not found in any other gospel.
Yeah, this specific illustration
Yes,
about
this
humility.
specific. Well, yeah, he
Yeah,
teaches
he
about
talks about humility, in other places.
elsewhere,
Yeah,
but this particular one.
Is this your favorite one? Is this passage the passage on humility that you're best
it's
at?
the one that I master the most.
Okay, so here we go. Luke chapter 14, verse 7 says, when Jesus noticed that all who had come to the dinner were trying to sit in the seats of honor near the head of the table, he gave them this advice. When you're invited to a wedding feast, don't sit in the seat of honor. What if someone who's more distinguished than you has also been invited? The host will come and say, hey, give this person your seat. And then you'll be embarrassed and you'll have to take whatever seat is left at the foot of the table. Instead, take the lowest place at the foot of the table. Then when your host sees you, he will come and say, friend, we have a better place for you. And then you'll be honored in front of all the other guests. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And then he turned to his host. When you put on a luncheon or a banquet, he said, don't invite your friends, brothers, relatives, and rich neighbors, for they'll invite you back, and that'll be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Then, at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could not repay you.
Yeah, really good.
There you go.
And by the way, I mean, think about how controversial this is. Invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind.
Mm-hmm.
See, back then they thought that people were cursed because of sins.
Right.
So if somebody was born blind, I mean, isn't there there are places elsewhere in Scripture where they said, why was this man born blind? Because of his sins or because of his parents' sins? Right. So they thought a lot of times that if you had leprosy or if you were crippled or if you sat outside the city gates, you weren't able to work, a lot of times it was because of God's punishment, which, by the way, is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Well, even in the world today, in a lot of the developing nations out in villages and stuff, if there's somebody who's different from the rest, they're concerned it might be a demon or something that made them do that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And didn't you say, what was it? Was it Egypt? Where if there was it was Egypt. We went to Egypt one time, and we were working with those who were handicapped. And those who are handicapped are looked at as that.
Yeah.
We looked at it so that they don't have courtesies like wheelchair ramps in Egypt. And so a lot of times if you have a handicapped sibling
out in the villages, like you can get in the city and they will, Cairo, but out in the villages they don't. You're right.
But anyway, the bottom line is it would often prevent even the siblings from getting married. So I remember I heard a story about a girl, and she was dating a guy, and then he found out that she had a brother in a wheelchair that was born lame and crippled, and he said, well, your family's cursed, therefore I'm not going to marry your family.
Right.
And apparently that's sort of like a widespread sort of thing. Yeah. Whereas we're appalled, and they were just like, what do you mean? Yeah. And it's like sort of widely accepted. Yeah.
It's kind of a fearful thing. They're afraid that genetically, I don't know that they're thinking genetics, but it's an instinct that, boy, if there's some kind of anomaly in the family, then we don't want to pass it on in our family. And so they blame it on demons, or they blame it on some kind of other thing. But yeah, that's it. So Jesus is telling, he's talking to two different groups of people here. He starts off talking to the guests.
Right.
And he finishes talking to the host.
Who are racing for the best seat.
Yeah, they're pushing for the very best seats. And to the host, he's talking about not being exclusive. That's really it. You get rewarded back when you invite the people who are just like you, and they have the ability to give to you what you just gave to them. You're kind of scratching each other's back. And Jesus said, there's something special for you. God will reward you in a special way when you include everybody and when you make room for the people who can't be a benefit or blessing to you.
Well, this is sort of reminds me of, like, how Jesus says, hey, if you love those who love you, then what reward do you have? Because even the pagans do that. Even the Gentiles do that. Those who don't even know God do that. It's easy to love those who are nice to you, but to love your enemies, that's a whole different thing altogether, because then your Father will reward you in heaven. And that idea of, inviting those to the banquet that can repay you, knowing that you'll get something back. He says, if you really want to do something worthwhile, do something where you'll not get any reward. Right. And not only that, but then it's a true act of giving as well, isn't it? Right. Because those people never get invited to anything. Right. And so it's sort of a 1-2 punch, right? And by the way, I think that it's interesting how he first sort of not scolds, but sort of I don't know if scold's the right word, but corrects gives advice to, points out the flaws of of those who are the guests. And then he turns around and then he talks to the host. And so the guests themselves are, at this point, he says, don't invite friends or relatives or neighbors. So you would imagine that the guests are probably of the same social status.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so and guess what? Those are the people that always are concerned with keeping up with the Joneses, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yep.
And then it's sort of that way today too, isn't it?
I think in this, he's not saying never invite your
Right.
neighbors or your friends or the rich.
Right.
He's trying to say also invite the lame and the sick and the blind and the poor and the crippled, right? That's what he's trying to do here. Otherwise, if you read that, then you could never have friends and family over.
Right.
But in other places in the Bible, it says we're supposed to take care of and love our friends and family, right? So
Right.
it's just that what he's saying is it's easy to do the ones that are just like you, and it's hard to remember the people who are different from you. So it's not never invite over your friends and family and always only invite the cripple and the lame and the poor. It's more of an also. Do both, right? Don't just think about the one.
So, I was thinking more about that statement I just made about keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
And, the idea that like when you're in that rat race and you have, I'm assuming that, it's easy to assume that they have a little bit of wealth. They're
Right.
they're holding a banquet, friends and neighbors are probably that same social class, and they're all fighting for the seat, which means they care. They really do care about being important. Right. That's what's on their mind and being seen as somebody who's prominent. I have a friend of mine who has millions of dollars. Okay, and I've known him for 20 years, and he is the poorest millionaire you've ever met in your life. Right, the only thing he is consumed with and talks about are the people richer than him, and he's like, oh, you think I have money? Let me tell you about this. All these people I run with, and I'm telling you what, man. The more you're putting kids through college and you're doing this, you're doing that. I'm telling you, man, it's just where does it go? And he's constantly poor mouthing everything, right? Oh, I did this remodel in the kitchen, and spent $40,000 on cabinets. And I got to tell you, but I knew a guy who spent $80,000 on cabinets,
right, yeah.
and I'm like, you have got to be kidding me, dude. You were the poorest multimillionaire that I know of.
Yeah.
But that's just the way it is. We just get consumed. And by the way, that's the same with Americans,
Right.
versus places you travel to, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what would you say, like Americans, like if we were to wake up and travel to a third world country or a
developing country.
country, what would you say we need to wake up to?
Well, almost everything. The fact, the regularity of our food, the clarity of our water, the medical accessibility, transportation accessibility, roof over our head. I mean, you just go on and on and on and on. The fact that you have, you had to decide what clothes to wear today, right? What shoes should I wear today? I literally stood there and tried to decide which one matched my clothes better today, right?
Wow.
Which pairs of shoes. You can just go on and on and on and on and on. The blessings that we have in America are just almost incomprehensible to the rest of the world. Now, we just feel that's normal. It's just normal. It's not like I'm trying to decide between $2,000 pairs of shoes. They're both Skechers,
Right.
but I have multiple pairs of shoes. I have, I can make up my mind on how I want to spend my free time. And in most developing nations, there isn't any free time, right? The decision of whether or not mom and dad get to eat dinner tonight, or do the children eat dinner tonight, those kinds of things. You just go on and on. So yeah, the learning to be grateful for what God's given us is so incredibly important. I look at that beginning though, and he talks about putting yourself out in the front, scrambling for all of the advantages. Maybe one of the most dangerous moments in my life, and I didn't realize it at the time. I have a music degree, so I actually was a worship leader for 15 years, and I was a trumpet player. Also through college, that's how I paid my way through college. I had a scholarship for trumpet, and so not to overly brag, but I was the best trumpet player I knew.
Right.
At the time, everywhere I played, I was always the first trumpet. And so I had several years where I hadn't played in any group because I was only doing church work, and then realized I didn't know anybody who wasn't a Christian, right? It had been several years and all of my friends were Christians, and it just dawned on me I hadn't led anybody to Jesus in a while. And it's because my entire life was insulated inside the church. So I started to try to think of ways to get out and meet, friends that weren't automatically, just assumed to be Christians. And I wound up getting invited to a group brass group, one of the top brass groups in America, and here in Detroit. And the guy who invited me had introduced me to the director. Director was like, "Oh, I really need a new solo trumpet player," and went on and on and on about it. And I said, "Oh, hey, I'd be happy." So I'm pulling into the driveway, all excited for this rehearsal, all excited about this opportunity, and thinking, "Man alive, I'm going to meet a bunch of people, and it's one of the best brass groups in the country." Super excited about this. And just before I walked in, this passage came to mind, where Jesus said, when you go to a party, don't go up and sit at the head of the table. Sit at the end, and it's better to be invited to the head of the table.
Right.
So when I walked in...
In other words, don't walk in and sit in the first chair.
Yeah. So when I walked in, the director handed me the first chair music. The solo music, not first chair, for solo. That's the top lead. And I was like, hey, you know what? This is my first time with you guys, and I'd really like to wrap my head around what you guys are doing. Why don't you give me third? I'll go sit down in third chair, and I'll just learn what you guys are doing, figure out what you're out, and figure out maybe how I can help best. And he's like, oh, wow. I've never had anybody do that. Okay. And so he took his second chair, moved him up to solo, put me down on third. He goes, okay, we're going to do number whatever. We pull out our music, and he goes, and we go ripping and tearing through this piece of music. I couldn't believe how hard it was. We get done, and I lean over to the other third chair, and I was like, wow, that was incredible. I've never played that before. And the other third chair goes, oh, none of us have. And they played it flawlessly, right? And I went, oh my goodness. So through the rest of the rehearsal, the solo and first chair stuff, I could get to the point where I could play it, but they were all sight reading it, first time they'd ever seen it, and they were playing it flawlessly. And boy, I dodged a bullet that day, right? So when I got done after rehearsal, I went up to him and he said, so what do you think? You can play the music? He said, you sound good. Everything sounded great. He said, next week, maybe solo. And I said, well, let me ask you this. What do you need more than a solo trumpet? And he goes, oh man, I need a tenor horn so bad. I can't get anybody to play it. I said, well, I don't have one, but I'd be willing to serve you there. I really felt like in the middle of the band, you were missing something anyways. I'd be willing to help. And he goes, you're kidding me. He said, I've got one. He handed it to me. And from that point on, I was like the savior for this guy. This guy was so glad. Yeah. And so now here I am. I feel like a fraud. Now, I could play that music, but it would have been a tremendous amount of work to get to that level. And instead, I wound up doing 54 concerts with one of the top bands in the country, 12 concerts with the Detroit Symphony. You just go on and on, all this stuff all around the country. I got to play with these people, an incredible level of music without shaming or embarrassing myself, because the instrument I wound up playing and the music I played was way easier than that solo trumpet spot. So I got into this really great group. But had I pushed myself to the front, I would have been dismissed and said, oh, thank you for coming. We'll call you later.
Well, it's exactly what Jesus said.
That's exactly
it is better to be invited to the head of the table than to assume that you're the best person in the room. Yeah, that is a tremendous story.
So I've had that thought many times walking into rooms where it was like the first time I was walking into a room and I knew that there was opportunity in the room. And another area is, now I've had an opportunity to be the chairperson of several different boards. But at both of the boards that I'm chair of now, I came into the opportunity telling the leader, hey, listen, I'm here to serve you. And I only have 3 people I say yes to all the time. So Chad, my executive pastor, and I, we've made a determination. We have these 3 people, and you're one of them. You're one of the people that if you ask, and it's possible, I'll say yes because I want to serve you, as long as it's legal and ethical and moral, right? Mm-hmm. And all 3 of those coming in to serve and then eventually getting elevated to, a significant position. I wasn't doing it in order to get elevated, but Jesus says those things tend to get rewarded, right? And so I would say those 3 times have been times when I dodged a bullet. If I'd pushed in, no opportunity would have been there. Yeah. But by coming and sitting at the end of the table, you get elevated. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Which may make me the humblest person at the table now that I think about it.
Yeah, most humble.
I may be.
You're maybe the best at being humble.
Absolutely. I won a trophy for being humble one time.
Yeah. And what happened to it?
Well, they had to take it away. I kept showing everybody.
So real quick, I got a quick story about this. So I taught humility from here, and then
I bet you did teach humility.
I taught it really good. I taught humility to my youth group when I was a youth pastor. I was a youth pastor for about 11, 12 years, and with high school students, and we did this whole study on Philippians 2, and then this passage here, and then just a couple other different passages, and so the idea was the phrase was race to the back of the line.
Oh, yeah.
So, we had a small church. It was just like less than 200 people, and then once a month we would do dinner on the grounds, and I said, I'm just tired of teenagers running to the front of the line whenever they say, hey, soup's on.
Yep.
So I said, wouldn't it be great if you guys waited to the back of the line every single time? What if you let others go before you? And we just like literally gave example after example of how to put into practice humility so that people would notice. And so I remember at that one point, I remember them getting into the back of the line and all the adults in the church, like something's going on with the teens, right? Like they're super like humble. Like what has happened?
The adults are starting to worry now. Is it some kind of prank?
Yeah. Well, then here's the point of my story. That leads up to this moment. So I go to take them to summer camp, and we had a big pavilion auditorium, and there's like 1,500 people. So imagine how big a crowd is of 1,500 people. And what he had wanted for every youth group, every church that brought their kids to sign up for KP duty to do the dishes for at least one shift. And but because we had just arrived there and we had just eaten lunch, they had nobody for the very first KP duty. So they wanted to just see if anybody wanted to volunteer. So he looks out at this crowd. We've only been there literally like an hour, right? And you know how excited we are. Everybody's excited. We're sitting in our little seats, and he goes, "Hey, is there anybody out there that?" And I brought like 60 kids. He goes, "Is there anybody out there that wants to volunteer for KP duty right now and just leave right now? And you're going to miss this session." And all 60 of my students, the only ones, by the way, in the whole 1,500 people, shot up within a half of a second. They all went, whoom, and they just stood up. And I remember all the other youth pastors looking at me with envy, saying, "Your kids are better than my kids." And I remember thinking, "That's right, baby.
That's right."
And but you know what?
That's because they have the most humble leader.
That's right. But listen, all kidding aside, I was so proud of them.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, this is amazing. And I'm telling you, there's power in it because everybody in the room was moved. They were like, "Wow."
Right.
And then I told them, I was like, "Hey, we're just studying about humility."
Right. That's great.
Really cool.
That's fantastic. So the race to the back of the line. It's not about being self-effacing or always talking yourself down.
Right.
I mean, when I went to that rehearsal, I knew I was good. I was. I'd done the work. But what I decided not to do was push myself to the front.
Yeah.
Instead, I raced to the back, and thank God I did. Right. Yeah. Your kids, your kids knew that they were great kids and all that kind of stuff, but they decided, hey, we're willing to serve this time rather than. And so that race to the back of the line thing is it's not that you don't deserve to be in the room. You were invited to the party.
Right.
It's that you're not forcing yourself to the front. You're gonna allow the leaders to discover your character.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're gonna demonstrate it.
Yeah. Humility is one of the most honorable traits, especially for people who lower themselves and you wouldn't expect them to.
Right.
When you see somebody very prominent being humble, it's like when Drew Brees told my son, "Oh, don't worry about the pens." I spoke for him for a chapel, and my son put the pens down. And Drew Brees goes, "Yeah, don't worry about it." And he gets on his hands and knees, and Drew Brees is picking up the pens. Oh, wow. And I slap my son in the arm, and I go, "Don't make Drew Brees pick up the pens." I'm like, "Get on your hands and knees, son, and get the pens." Right?
Yeah.
But it was just a great example of somebody who's worth millions of dollars and somebody who's really prominent and well known. And I still
solid Christian.
Yeah. And I still remember that moment.
Yeah.
Because he was that humble to serve me and my son who he didn't even know.
The note in the Life Application Bible, we can finish with this, says, humility is not self-degradation. It is realistic self-assessment and commitment to serve.
Yeah. That's great.
That's really it. Being willing to serve.
Well, hey, that's a great place to end. And we will see you next time on the Bible Guys.